Genesis 1:1 says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth," is like the translation that I know. Can you talk about how that can be translated differently?
Yeah. So this is a fun thing, and for me, it's an especially relevant thing because um, I started off my career in with studying theology, and I did Hebrew and Greek first, and then like I I was actually I was really annoyed by the fact that I didn't learn more when I did Hebrew and Greek, and the teachers would kind of say it is what it is when I would ask questions. And I mean, we didn't say that back then, but it was also in Norwegian. They said it different, but you know. So exactly, that's a really good example of what we've been talking about. Like, what would I say for this Norwegian phrase? We say that all the time. That's just what it is. That's just, but like now after this, it is what it is became popular in English. I have a perfect translation for this phrase that I never could say in English, but I wouldn't have known that 20 years ago. So it's funny that I've updated the translation of this experience. So and I knew exactly what I was pointing to, but now I have it. Yeah. Anyway, so I had done this. I had done Hebrew and Greek and all that kind of stuff, and I got inspired to learn more about linguistics, and that's how I got into linguistics. Was really just people telling me you've got to accept it about grammar.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just a horrible thing, is to go around saying, well, we just don't have a good answer for you. I wasn't sure whether they didn't have a good answer, whether there was no answer, so I was like, there's got to be an answer to this. And there was like, oh, linguistics. And I mean, I'll tell you, like the probably the most religious experience I've had one of the top three most religious experiences I've had in my life was my first lecture in linguistics that I went to. And this professor basically, like, he gave his introductory lecture about languages and dialects and change and all that, and he changed his dialect throughout the thing and moved his way like through Norway and Norwegian dialects and Sweden and Denmark, and did this amazing thing. I sat there like in awe. Like, it was for me like watching someone completely inspired by God, doing something. And so it was obviously inspired by the Holy Spirit, and that's it, speaking in tongues or whatever. But
Yeah.
but it was
Oh,
just
maybe
it
he
was
was.
yeah, he
He
was
wasn't supposed to
literally.
do. Yeah.
But it was like, it was so cool. I wasn't. I mean, so I don't mean it seriously. I didn't think about God very much at that moment. I was thinking about how awesome it was. Like, I was awestruck, and it was like, this is so cool. I have to learn everything about this. And and so I did linguistics and did all the basics of linguistics and all that kind of stuff. And then you have to also do some training in specific languages. That's the way the structure is here at the University of Oslo. And so one of the languages I took was modern Hebrew, because I'd done biblical Hebrew. And so we did modern Hebrew as spoken in Israel. And we went through this whole long year of modern Hebrew, and we did our conversations and all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the year, one of the last lectures, the teacher said, "Oh, now we're going to do something fun. We're gonna sit down and read some biblical Hebrew and just show you guys that you know how to read biblical Hebrew already, and show how fun it is." And I had already done years of biblical Hebrew, so I was like, "Oh, this is going to be easy." But everybody else shows up, and the first thing we do is read from Genesis 1, and then you read Bereshit bara Elohim, and everybody's like, "Wait, what? What does it say? Oh my, what?" And everybody's in shock, because the first word is Bereshit, which means in a beginning. It's indefinite. It's not the definite in the beginning. And so when you read straight forward, it says in a beginning, and everybody's like, "Wait, what? There's got to be something wrong. It's printed wrong." And the teacher's like, "Nope, that's what it says. Like, it's an indefinite. It's an indefinite word." And the room, is in shock, and everybody's like, "What?" And so it starts a lot of discussions. And so that was a great moment to be kind of witness people who had spent a year learning Hebrew to get there and then read it and be like, "Oh my gosh, that's what the verse actually says." And so and so that's what it says, right? When you read straightforward, if you read that word alone in the beginning, then it's not in the beginning; it's in a beginning, is what it says. And so that is why some people will say, well, the first verse of the Bible is just wrong in most translations. It's not in the beginning, but it's in a beginning or something like that. Um,
Whoa.
so that's the that's the first level of this. So that's that. I mean, and on a straightforward reading of someone who's reading only that word, that's how you would translate it. Now, there's a couple of different. This is a really difficult translation issue, actually, when we get into it, because there's a couple of different ways you can look at it, and one of the things is that you have to look at words in the context that they're in, not just isolated. And so this word that's in isolation, that's an indefinite word. If you read it in the context of the entire phrase, um, could be imagined as being dependent on the phrase that follows it, and then it wouldn't be just in a beginning, but it would be uh, in the beginning of the creation of the heavens and the earth, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be that's one of the solutions that some scholars come up with, is that it's not in the beginning, but it's in the beginning of the creation of the heavens and the earth, or in the beginning of God's creating the heavens and the earth, or when God created the heavens and the earth, and something like that. That they make it a temporal phrase, so it's explaining the when of the phrases that come after, and so that's one way of looking at it. I think most scholars that go that way look to Genesis 2:4, um, and maybe a couple other places, like because on in Genesis 2:4, then it basically says um, on so it says on the day of God's making the heavens and the earth, or something like that. It uses a different verb for creation, uses a different, but it also uses a different verb form, and so that's why I'm not 100% convinced by the temporal clause explanation, like that. Um, in the beginning of God's creating the heavens and the earth, blah blah blah. It might be it might be like that, but honestly, David, there's also a simpler explanation, because in Hebrew, the problem here is that in Hebrew you don't have vowels written in the consonant text, right? You just have the consonants themselves, and the difference between the definite and the indefinite is only the vowel. And so, like when you look at the text without vowels, which we had all the way up until the Masoretes put it on there in the say 5, 6, 700s, whatever, that you wouldn't be able to distinguish the definite from the indefinite. And so there's no way of us actually being certain that the Masoretes got that exactly right by saying that it was like instead of an ah. It's a very small detail. You would think they would have rather corrected it in favor of it reading in the beginning and not in a beginning, or whatever. The more difficult seems like the more difficult way of reading it, but it could just be the difference of like a stroke of a pen.
Mm.
And so I don't feel like it's a very big deal, because I think that it's either way you look at it, like we're um, it's 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 part of or you have to explain it away somehow. Like it's not the
Mm.
obvious reading. The obvious reading isn't what you see on the paper.
Yeah. It it's interesting though, because we're at verse 1 of chapter 1 of book 1 of 66 books of the Bible.